Welcome back to Coast Rugby. It's episode 3. The test weekend is finally here, so it's very exciting. Before we dive into the meat of it, how are you doing, Ella?
I'm doing good. Full of excitement. Prepping myself for a weekend on the couch as things finally kick off. It's come around very quickly, don't you think?
It has. I wonder, for the players, it must be like you go out on tour and maybe the first week that you're away, probably quite slow because you're full of anticipation. And then it must just be a rush just into that first game.
Oh, truly. And especially I'm thinking of like the English and All Blacks, they're having to go to Dunedin. That's a bit of a big trek if they've been based in Auckland down to the south. So yeah, it probably moves pretty quickly at this point. They'll be very excited.
Yeah. You said you saw the England players really enjoying the best of the local area.
Yeah, they were out fishing. They've been hooning around on lime scooters, been walking up Mount Eden, which if you've been to New Zealand, that's a beautiful little spot, almost giving kind of my ideal Auckland weekend. So I'm glad that they're enjoying what this beautiful country has to offer.
Yeah, say the same for Ireland. It looks like they're getting out, meeting people in the community, doing all the right kind of stuff. Although the training sessions look pretty difficult too. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd stick those sessions for a trip away, but that's why I'm not a professional athlete. Well, it's one of the many reasons why I'm not a professional athlete.
That's it.
But yeah, so three big tests to talk about this weekend, really. We've got New Zealand, England, the Wallabies against Wales, South Africa v Ireland. Like you say, you can spend the whole day on the couch just enjoying rugby. But I guess we should start with, on our side, the morning game. So bright and early. I think it's 8:05 kickoff. Cup of coffee.
That's so nice for you guys.
It is quite nice actually, because it's not too early, and you can start the day with what looks like it's going to be a pretty intense game. The two squads are out.
They are out, and England did not come to F about at all. I looked at that team list, and I was a little bit alarmed as an All Blacks fan. I don't know. What did you reckon?
It's funny because I do think it's weird. You have to qualify it. They have as good a chance as you'll ever have of winning in New Zealand in this first test just because of the conditions, the new coach, lack of playing time, all that kind of stuff. But then you look at the actual New Zealand team and you're like, oh my God, that's ridiculous.
It is comforting. I did feel quite a bit of comfort from that All Blacks lineup. Things that felt familiar, but some exciting new changes. I don't know, thinking about names that kind of stuck out from that England squad in particular, they've made some changes in the front row. We see Joe Marler kind of come in, and then it's Will Stewart coming in for Bevan Rod. Do you think that they see the All Blacks front row as a pretty potent threat?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's been well remarked upon in the media around here since that Rugby World Cup semi-final where they got pulverized by the South African scrum when the replacements came on. They try and always have one of Marler and Cole on the field at any given time to try and help keep the scrum up. And it's worked for them quite well. But since the World Cup, I don't think they've had a test as big as this because that New Zealand front row is tasty. And the subs as well.
Yeah, I don't think we have fully reckoned as a country with the fact we have Tyrell Lomax and Ethan de Groot starting as your starting props. And then coming on bomb squad-esque, I would say, we have Ofa Tuingafasi and Fletcher Newell and the human wrecking ball, Asafo Almua, coming on as well. So good luck to the English in the front row. Is there anyone else that you thought maybe surprised to see or excited to see? It is quite consistent with the Japan game in many ways.
It is, yeah. I just quickly on Fletcher Newell, I said this to you before, but he joins the list of other international players who, just from looking at them, I can't believe don't play for Ireland. He's on there with Stephen Kitsoff. Like, how are those two guys not our guys? It keeps me up at night, honestly.
Someone needs to be doing some investigations into the potential Irish leagues.
It just feels like we should have scouted them, is all I'm saying. We should have at least had a go.
I mean, they've been giving it a good go. They've been giving it a good go over here lately.
Yeah, we've got plenty. I should be happy with what we have.
Be grateful.
Yeah. The back row, I think, stands out because New Zealand are still, like, for international test rugby, a little light. Artie's incredible, but he's really quite light for an 8. It just makes what he's able to do all the more impressive, to be honest. But I am interested because not so much in the World Cup, but definitely during the Foster era, there was this idea floating around that like maybe New Zealand are a bit lightweight. Maybe they've prioritized skillful, faster players over weight. And international rugby is so much just about heft now and physicality. And, Finau is a beast, but the other two guys are no one who plays international rugby is small, but they're on the smaller side for back row players. And England's back row is pretty meaty. So I do wonder who's going to get the edge there. That's like, I can't wait to see those guys face off against each other. Like particularly Finau and Cunningham South, because they're both absolute units.
It's going to be, it's like mouth watering. I'm like, I'm so
excited.
No, the Lucy's in particular, and obviously that Ben Earl Artie matchup has got people talking. And I think no one's probably looking forward to it more than Ben Earl. He'll be so excited. Maybe a big surprise in the All Black squad was Stephen Petafeta getting named at 15. And, the assumption is that it was over Bowden Barrett, who will now be on the bench. We haven't seen that much of Petafeta this season due to injury. I mean, he's played a bit of 10 at the Blues and then a bit of 15. And he's famously only played 50 seconds for the All Blacks previously. So hopefully he gets more of a lengthy run out this time, which should be the case bar something really unfortunate. But that was a bit of a surprise. I think they'll be wanting to use his boot to quite good effect in this game.
It shows the symmetry between the two teams, especially in the back line. Like Marcus Smith and Damien McKenzie, obviously sort of similar mold of player. And then both teams going for that second playmaker at 15, whether it's Furbank for England or Perifetta for New Zealand. And you got to feel like it's going to be a bit of a chess match, especially like the tactical kicking and who gets the edge there. Because it really, under Foster, I feel like it really made or break. It was really make or break for New Zealand, like whether they got that battle right. Because I remember at Twickenham when they got smashed by South Africa before the World Cup, their kicking game was awful. But when you beat them in the Rugby Championship a couple months before, the kicking game was incredible. And you won the game just through the kicking game. So I'm really, really psyched to see, because I think Mwanga's probably a bit more known for it than McKenzie is, right?
Yeah, I think DMAC probably better off the tee. But yeah, I think in terms of tactical kicking, and maybe it's purely conjecture, right? And some kind of tired associations around DMAC and potentially being a bit erratic, that you can't think of him as this like tactical George Ford-esque mastermind. But I think he'll be out to prove some people wrong this weekend. And we know that Felix Jones has obviously come in and made a huge impact on the English team, a lot around their attack, but the blitz defense has been something that's been kind of coming in. How do you see that playing a role in this game?
I'm super excited for that, because you listen to like experienced coaches or former players talk about how you battle a rush defense, and it's like either you look for a disconnect with an inside ball, or it's a short kicking game, you get it over the top and you get them turned and you make them panic. And like when Ireland blitzed Scotland in the Rugby World Cup in the pool stages, and then in the quarterfinal, it only sort of took 10-15 minutes of Bowden Barrett stabbing little kicks in behind before you suddenly started to see the weaknesses in that defensive structure. And I do wonder, because England got much better at it through the Six Nations, but especially at the start of the tournament, they were still learning the system and there were holes everywhere. And like Scotland exploited it, Wales even exploited it, right? And they don't have much of an attack to speak of at the moment. So looking at this game, it's like the talent in that New Zealand backline, the Razor propensity to like get wingers popping up and doing short carries and lots of options for the man with the ball every time. It's a big test, is like, how far has the England rush defense come? Or are they going to maybe ease off a little bit in the face of a more talented opponent? And then the other side of it is, has Razor had enough time, to bed the ideas in?
Yeah, and that's the big question. I think even at the presser today, many people were saying how much of an impact, or how prepared do you feel with this short of a run in? And obviously Razor's not going to sit there and go, nah, I'm not prepared. I've got no idea what I'm doing. But there's got to be a question over how much he can reasonably instill and how much information he can kind of jam into the brains of these poor players, fresh off a Super Rugby final for many of them, without overwhelming them. So I expect that there will be plans in place to counter, as much as they can. But I don't think we're going to see a complete rewrite of the Foster era or the existing structures from Razor, because they just simply don't have the time. So maybe it's the V1 or the first evolution of Razor, and we're going to see some real kind of development as things progress into the Rugby Championship, because he's been quite clear in his messaging and quite short focused. He said, hey guys, we're just here to beat England. This is the squad to beat England. This is the 23 to beat England. The game plan we've come up with is the game plan to beat England. So I think in doing so, he said, don't expect me to completely throw everything out, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm just here to get a win. So we shall see how he goes on the first step to that journey.
More parallels, because Borthwick's journey with England's been quite similar. Like, took over in not ideal circumstances, got them through a Six Nations, got them to the semi-final of a World Cup, but not doing anything pretty. And since then, has completely changed the outlook on how this team plays.
It's such a good lesson for the New Zealand public, I think. Watch, see what's happened with Borthwick and how that's unfolded. Patience, people. Patience.
Yeah. But we are expecting some attacking rugby, right? Because they're playing under the roof.
Absolutely. Such a perk of playing in Dunedin. Who would have ever thought, we're saying that playing under the roof probably suits both teams. I never thought we would have said that about
not about an England team.
No, perfect conditions guaranteed.
Oh, honestly. And it's so great to have Test rugby back again. It's so great to have northern and southern hemisphere teams playing each other again. It's just, there's nothing else like it in the sport.
No, there really isn't. And I think, there's so much rugby and people talk about fatigue from players, from fans. But when you get to this top level, the excitement levels truly raise. And I have no words.
Well, this is the hardest part. The games are in a couple of days, so it's probably time to do some predictions.
I never want to commit anything on the record.
I never do either. But I don't know. I did so many predictions in the World Cup, and I got so many of them wrong. I feel like I'm sort of like, it's like a vaccine. I'm immune to it now.
Okay.
So I think we decided we're going to do winning margins is less than 5, between 5 and 12, and 12 plus.
Correct.
So that we're not just picking random numbers.
Yeah.
So New Zealand are the home team. So I'm going to give you home advantage and let you go first. What do you think? Or is it home advantage to go second? I'm not sure what's better.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll go first. I'll take one for the team. I think, the English haven't won in New Zealand since 2003. Prior to that, they hadn't won since 1973. That gives us clear 30-year intervals. 30 years hasn't been yet since 2003. So I'm saying let's wait till 2033. 2024 won't be the year. New Zealand will be winning by a margin of 12 points or less, between 5 and 12.
Okay. I think it's hard to disagree with that, to be honest with you. Like, if England win, they're not going to win by much, right? And just the fact that they're away from home, their direction of travel is definitely up. But I think the feel-good factor around New Zealand is strong as well. And just man for man, it's a more talented team, right? Like, you look at those 15 players and you think there's some really big names there that England maybe can't quite measure up to. But I think we'll see a performance from it. I'm going to go New Zealand by less than 5.
Okay. I respect that.
Yeah. I think we'll see a performance from both of them, to be fair.
Yeah. Oh, it's the ultimate test of, I guess, where Borthwick's so far upward trajectory is going, and is the compass set to the right direction. But it's also a great litmus test for Razor. I don't think he could have asked for a better team to be put up against first. So
yeah, I definitely think that's true, right? To banish the ghosts of the previous regime, and to kind of set his stall out. This is the perfect team to play.
Absolutely. And they were probably, in fairness, England were probably the bogey team in some ways, other than Ireland, for that Foster era All Blacks. Like a draw, a loss at the
draw. Yeah.
2019 was Steve Hansen, but Foster was obviously around then, so he can claim that one.
I heard a comparison. Like, I didn't realize compared to Hansen how bad Foster's record was. And you say bad, still winning the vast majority of games that you play, but like Hansen's record was dominant. It was a completely different ball game. Do you think, as Squidge said in his video this week, do you think the rest of us should be very afraid about a Razor-inspired All Blacks? Because I already am, just for the record.
I like that, after so much conversation around is the All Blacks aura broken, or, it's not there anymore, that it just took one man coming in for people to think it's maybe back in place. Can I come back to you after we've had one game?
Yes,
I just
absolutely.
obviously we've got a whole heap of Super Rugby evidence, but test level is so different. I am excited as a fan. I guess I'm excited, which maybe, opponents should be scared.
Yeah.
But let's regroup after this weekend, I reckon. Then we'll have a better idea, some data.
Fair. Well, wait till you hear this segue. From high expectations over this test to the lowest possible expectations around the Wallabies and Wales. What have the coaches been saying this week?
Well, straight from the mouth of one Kiwi, Warren Gatland, he said, we know that we need to be in the fight for the full 80 minutes. I don't know if that fills you with confidence that they're just planning on trying to fight for the full 80 minutes. Joe Schmidt, another Kiwi, on the other hand, has been saying, I can't promise you like the cohesion of like a fully formed, well-practiced team, but I can promise you we will work hard, which is a very classic Joe Schmidt line.
Yes.
So I feel like we're getting some clear messaging from both of these coaches.
Yeah, I do think, to be fair, the Gatland messaging is accurate. Like, if you look at the Six Nations campaign they had, they didn't stay in the fight for 80 minutes in any of those games. Well, England, they were in the fight for an hour, maybe, but they certainly didn't bring it down to the wire in any game. So I can definitely see. I mean, I think he is just being honest about where the team is. And he's like, look, before we can even think about building on top of a foundation, we have to lay the foundation, right? As you say, for Joe Schmidt, it's just classic, like playing it down. That's always what he does. But we have not just Gatland playing down expectations. Did you see Nick Tompkins' comments in the press this week?
No, what did he say?
So he came out and said something really, really similar, but he was like a bit more explicit. And he came out and he said, look, we need to go back to our DNA, go back to basics. So we're going to play a limited game plan that some people might find a bit boring to watch, which, number one, talk about managing expectations. Like, you're being very blunt there. But number two, I don't think anyone was massively entertained by the way they played in the Six Nations. So if they're talking about scaling it back even more, that's wild.
Maybe that will be when I catch my nap before the next game and then amongst 3 games of rugby, because he's not selling it to me. If we're talking about fan experience and spectacle, as you know, we were talking to Ben O'Keefe last week and it was very clear that World Rugby is trying to sell a spectacle. I don't know if Nick Tompkins is really doing it there, unfortunately.
And then that brings us on to the team selection, because those comments from Gatland and from Tompkins, if you put them alongside the team selection, like, I don't necessarily feel that those two things are particularly joined up. What do you reckon?
No, well, the thing that stood out to me was Ben Thomas, who's been selected at fly half, and he's played how many games? I think you were doing some research earlier at fly half.
4 games at fly half, and he's played 55 at centre and fullback.
Because who were you expecting them to pick?
Costello. He's been, it seems like, the anointed next guy for the number 10. And he was like, he's had a difficult start to life in a Wales shirt because the team hasn't been going well, but he was a really highly rated prospect when he was at Leicester Tigers, and a super talented player. But
we've got Ben Thomas.
Yeah, he's on the bench for some reason. But yeah, going through the rest of that team, they've made a few changes, like a few tweaks that don't necessarily suggest, we're gonna go back to basics. But what's good for Wales fans to see is, like, Dafford Jenkins back in, Shunza back in, but he's in the second row, which is interesting because he plays in the back row a lot as well. Tommy Reffel back in. A lot of people would have wanted to see that. And Josh Hathaway, who's a really kind of talented youngster. He's a winger or a fullback, and he's starting at 14. So Liam Williams can play at 15. But it doesn't strike me as a back to basics selection. I will say that. How are things looking on the Australian side?
The Australian side, I think the word I would use is inexperienced, but that's not entirely surprising. We've got a new captain, anointed, Liam Wright, who has played a total of 5 tests for the Wallabies and hasn't played one since 2020. So he becomes the 7th captain that the Wallabies have had in a year.
Wow.
But he is surrounded by many of those 7 captains in the side. Tate McDermott's there. He's on the bench. James Slipper's there. Alan Alalator's there. So those are all experienced leaders that will be able to help Liam Wright on that journey. There are 7 debutants in the 23, which makes it the most debutants the Wallabies have put forward in 44 years. So go Joe. We talked initially about him being conservative. I don't think this is super conservative.
No. This feels like we're going to have a go. We're going to give people a chance, and we're going to see what we can get to.
Yeah.
But I don't think he will have. I don't think he will have worried. Like, I don't think he will have filled their heads with too much information either. Like, I think it will be very basic, the stuff that he's asking them to do.
And he wants them to do it well, right? That's kind
Yeah.
of, he's like, I want you to do these things I've asked of you with maximum effort. Your work rate's going to be high. And from there we can talk.
Yeah. Speaking of work rate, actually, did you see Gatland's comments about like absolutely flogging the players in training and saying that, like, you know, it's going to be too hard for somebody?
I don't know how I'd react if I heard my coach saying, I don't know if you're going to be able to cope with this.
It's very old school, isn't it? It's like putting the challenge out there and seeing who rises to it.
In the press.
Well, to be fair, I don't know where the comments came from. I don't know if he meant for them to come out, but still.
In saying that, around hard workers who are kind of in that Australian team, we are seeing, you know, the Callaways are there, Tom Wright's there, Galantini's there. So there is some real threads of classic, great Australian rugby, high performers. I'm excited to see them get a run out and hopefully leave the ghosts of Eddie Jones in the past, finally.
Yeah. I mean, even for all the experimentation, you look at that team and like Slipper, Tupou, Salakai Lotto, Valentini, Paisami, Kellaway, like there's still plenty of experience. They're still really, really good players. And I think looking at the two team sheets, I know who I'd prefer to be supporting. Like, I think I'd go in much more excited if I was an Australia fan than if I was a Welsh fan. But, you know, you never know. Like, the shake-up that they've got for Wales and trying Thomas at 10, like, it might work. Sometimes what you need is a shake-up to kind of breathe some new life into a group. And if, like Gatland says, they can stay in the fight for 80 minutes, and if they can put on a bit of a performance, win or lose, the feel-good factor goes up.
Like, absolutely. And I think both these teams are desperate in different ways.
Yeah.
Wales desperate sometimes in just their general gameplay and performance and, you know, max input, minimal output, but, you know, that desperation, but also desperate to end this losing streak. And then Wallabies desperate to get things off to a good start. And, you know, when desperation comes into play, that can stoke really good performances individually and as a team.
Exactly. Just difficult to bottle it and have it express itself in the right way, I suppose, especially when the pressure is all on you from outside.
Yes, absolutely.
So another interesting one, it's a sort of like a throwback Kiwi coach off. Like, neither of these two guys are massively, their styles wouldn't be massively in vogue at the moment, you know? It feels like everybody's kind of moved on from them a little bit. But
yeah, what's
the view at home of these two guys?
Well, I think the main concern with Joe Schmidt is obviously that he was in the All Blacks camp last year. So people are going, what's he doing with all that IP? But the All Blacks camp is obviously a very different place also. So who knows? Gatland, look, I think when he left for Wales again, and he kind of had run the Chiefs into a big hole in the ground, people were maybe not super sad to see him go again. But definitely having two Kiwi coaches at the helm of these nations, being able to watch that unfold adds another layer. And, you know, as Kiwis, we're dotted around all through the rugby landscape. As we talked about before, there's a few of us in Ireland, so not foreign feeling.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And you mentioned a big piece of news for the Wallabies, like sort of more about the future, right? Because they'd already announced that there were going to be no foreign-based players in the squad this time round. But yeah, what's going on with
an update on one of those 7 former captains, Will Skelton, who's the hulking big lock, who currently plays in France. He's just signed an extension with La Rochelle in France to continue through to 2028, which obviously takes him past the Rugby World Cup. The way the eligibility works for Australia to play for the Wallabies, you have to be playing in Australia, except for they have a Ghetto law named after Matt Ghetto, where they have the option to pick 3 players who are based overseas. You have to be over a certain number of caps. And so, you know, they've always brought back, Skelton's been brought back previously, Corambetti, those types of players. And the rule was actually made for Matt Ghetto because in the 2015 World Cup, they ran out of 10s very quickly and had to bring him back. So the question remains or becomes, what does this mean for Will Skelton? Joe Schmidt hasn't included any overseas-based players in his current squad. He may do so for the Rugby Championship when the squad increases, but maybe he'll choose to keep prioritizing players who are in the country. Fully respect that, you know, French rugby, you get packed stadiums every week. The pay packet is pretty good.
Not to mention the money.
And the lifestyle is pretty good. So you can't fault Will Skelton for wanting to stay over there. And then I guess he's put it in Joe Schmidt's hands as to whether he will be selected. But certainly interesting looking towards the Lions tour and the World Cup coming up.
Yeah. Well, so we had high expectations. We went into the trough of low expectations, and now we're going back up. South Africa against Ireland. Yeah. Well, do you know, I'm starting to wonder. It is the big one, but I do think New Zealand and England is also the big one. Like, I don't think there's much between these two test series in terms of the quality you can expect and like the intensity that they're going to play at. Like, I am really excited for that. Obviously, the media intensity around South Africa and Ireland is off the charts. But
it's been wild seeing all the Irish journalists on Twitter like landing in South Africa, and there's been banter left, right, and centre. Then Russie kicking off at press conferences, Eben getting a few jabs in about saying the Irish media were picking on him. So it took all of probably 10 seconds for the contingent to arrive in South Africa before shots were being fired.
I mean, I think people on social media take it too far, but I love it from the actual players and the management. Like, I do think it all seems relatively good-natured.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, I think Razzie's come quite a long way since the whole Nick Berry thing. Like, that really was a disaster, but I do think he's learned from that experience, and I think they're mainly keeping it above board at the moment. But I actually wanted to start with him because classic shit-stirring move from him. He tried to predict the Ireland team ahead of time last week, and yesterday the Ireland team hasn't dropped. But yesterday there was what felt like quite a strategic leak to the press that Jamie Osborne might be in line to start at 15, and that the Ireland backline might have a very different shape to what Rassie was expecting. Is there much awareness of who Jamie Osborne is down your way?
No, I did have to do some Googling, and I knew that I'd come on to Coast Rugby and get my education from Andy Nolan. But yeah, no, Russie, I don't know if Andy Farrell did it to just say, you thought. But yeah, Jamie Osborne seeming to be making that starting lineup at fullback.
Yeah, I think the Rassie thing, I think, is completely independent. Like, if you look at the makeup of the squad, it looks like Ireland have had this in the back pocket since they named the squad. Because like when I did a video reacting to the squad, and I was like, they look very light at 15. Because on the one hand, it seemed like they brought 3 10s in Crowley, Prendergast, and Frawley. But I thought Frawley surely got to be there at 15 because the only out-and-out 15 they had was Jimmy O'Brien. And it's like, surely you can't just bring one on tour. But I wasn't aware that Osborne had played a bunch at 15 in his underage career. Apparently was very, very good there. For Leinster, they use him as an exit option sometimes, not enough actually, because he has a huge left boot. Like, he can absolutely wallop it, and in the thin air up at Loftus, I think that's going to be a real weapon. So I'm really excited. He's also just a big lad, big tackler, very physical player. He kind of seems made for this, but obviously getting thrown in at fullback, which is against the Springboks, a position where you get really exposed if you're not up to it. It's a huge challenge for him. So it's one of those things where, like, I'm really excited to see it happen. It's the sort of invention that as Ireland fans, we always complain that there isn't enough of in the team. But, you know, I'm also nervous for him, and I hope it goes well.
You have sounded nervous the last couple of times I've spoken to you, which was not the flavor that I expected from Irish fans heading into this series necessarily.
It's difficult because you're making judgment based on the year. It's so funny, you know, the joke about us is always that we peak between World Cups. We peaked for the 2023 World Cup. We were amazing that season. We went into the World Cup looking fantastic. We looked $1 million in the pool stages, and then it just didn't come off against New Zealand. And now, when you're on top, and I mean, we were ranked number 1 in the world. I know there's a big debate about what that actually means.
You were.
We were the team with the target on our back. Everybody wanted to beat us, right?
Winning streak.
Yeah, huge winning streak. And you've got teams like New Zealand and South Africa looking at Ireland thinking like, oh, these lads think they're the best. We're going to show them, right? The only place you can go from there is down. And Ireland has gone down just a little bit because we've lost a couple of games. It's only a little bit, but we've lost a couple of games. The club sides have looked a bit stale. And it sort of has the feeling of maybe going into a series where we struggle because South Africa obviously won the World Cup, as confident can be. Looks like a really, really solid team. They've got everyone available as well. Well, almost everyone. So I do feel nervous about it. I'm not going to lie.
Maybe, though, some healthy nerves. Joe Schmidt has been saying he's nervous, and he was like, if I'm not nervous, then I don't think we can get the job done. So we're going to reframe. We'll reframe some good nerves. Some good
Yeah.
nerves.
No, I think that's true. And also, we didn't even mention Gibson Park being out is huge as well. Like, he's so much of what makes our attack tick. But you can do the Andy Farrell and you can flip it around and you can say adversity like this is to test yourself and it's a chance to see what you're capable of doing, difficult circumstances, and they don't get much more difficult than this because that South Africa team. Talk us through it.
Well, the big thing I think for me was seeing Kwar Smith starting at 8. You know, we know he can play there. That's not in question. But he's been the heart and soul of the bomb squad, particularly last year.
Yeah.
Coming in, you know, those decisive turnovers, stripping balls off players left, right, and center. So I think seeing him start at 8, maybe not a full surprise. Obviously, Vermeulen's now in the coach's box and there's some injuries and things, but I'm eager to see how that goes. Bomb squad, no more. Also, Sasha is on the bench, not Mani Libok. What does that kind of tell us about this? We've been talking about an ongoing battle for the 10 position in the Springboks. What does that indicate to us?
You know, it's really interesting. First ever technical trouble on Coast to Coast.
That's okay. We're good. We're back. We were talking
about
Sasha being in, Mani Libok not being in. What does that mean? What does that tell us? What can we learn from that?
Oh, I think it means they really want to win this game and they don't want to take any risks. But, like, surely there's a future where, say you started Sasha at 15 instead of Willie Leroux and you had his ability off the tee, then you could pick Mani Libok at 10 and then you could have his playmaking ability. So, like, it just opens up more options for them, honestly. But in this game, I think it tells you, like, they think it's going to be a battle. They think it's going to be tight. They think they're going to need those 3 points, build that scoreboard pressure. And, you know, at Loftus, Pollard's going to slot them from everywhere, isn't he? So,
honestly, well, that interesting that you say, yeah, they think it's going to be tight, which isn't necessarily unexpected. But I think the fact we see 12 players remaining from the World Cup final indicates we need our big players who have that big game temperament, who we know have been through this type of pressure before. So game face on well and truly for the Springboks.
Yeah, massively. And just such a strong group. And still finding a way to get some new names in there. It feels like their team is in a really healthy place at the moment. And
they'll be feeling extra healthy because they've got their not fat and not transparent captain back, Siya Kolisi, named to start as well, which I think Rusty was overjoyed to make sure everyone knew at the press conference. So, you know, their leader, he really is the heart and soul of that team. So, very exciting.
For that French chairman to say that, like, whatever Kolisi is, like, even if he wasn't taking it seriously, right? And let's be honest, I think you could forgive someone having a jolly free year after winning the World Cup, going to France on a big pay packet, living in Paris, you know, enjoy your baguette. I think you've earned it, right? But to come out publicly and just slam him like that is ridiculous. And Razzie coming out and defending him like full with everything he's got, that's 100% the way a coach should behave. 100%.
Oh, I can't. It's outrageous. Like, and again, like you say, if he wasn't taking it seriously, kind of fair enough. But also, that's the role of the coach to go and speak to the player privately.
Exactly.
How, in what world is that good man management? And do you think you're going to get a good response from your player by slamming them in the press? I don't know if you ever saw what happened. Yeah. Did you ever see what happened with Julian Savia at Toulon?
Yeah. That was horrible.
Well, I think they replaced him on the plane. This isn't the Julian Savia we signed. So they obviously have a track record in France of just doing that kind of thing. So interesting management style for sure. But yeah, happy to see Siya probably back to his best for his favorite team to play for.
Yes. And I think the fans are going to give him a big welcome. I think they're all thrilled to see him back as well. I do think it's going to be a huge battle. Like, you know, looking ahead to those predictions, you've got to think South Africa are massive favourites, right? We've won one test match there in forever. But, you know, stuff like bringing Osborne in, like those little freshening up movements, on the one hand, you can be like, oh, that's worrying because he doesn't have much experience. And on the other hand, you can think like, maybe that's the breath of fresh air the squad needs. Maybe that's the change they need. Oh, I'm so excited, honestly. I feel like it's really... I don't think calling the results that difficult. Like, I think there's quite a high probability that South Africa are going to win the game. But I think, like, calling the manner of the game and thinking about how it's going to play out, that's really, really difficult.
Oh, how long until we get a bit of biff on the field? I think we're talking 10 minutes. before
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
You know, the tension is going to be so high. That first scrum, could you imagine being in the middle of that, or like the bottom of the first ruck? No,
Yeah.
thank you.
First high ball, like all of that stuff is tension is gonna be at an absolute fever pitch when that game kicks off, because it'll be a full house, right? Like South African fans, they bring the noise when they come. They'll be blasting Zombie out every chance they get. Like they will be doing whatever they can to try and unsettle the Irish. But as you said before, like Farrell always has that inward focus, you know, stoic as you like on the outside, just focus on. He's always in press conferences talking about, you know, this is about us being the best version of ourselves. They tend not to worry about the opposition too much, which, you know, there are different. I think it's great that there are so many different approaches in rugby, but seeing him coming up against Rassie really is like, they're so opposite. Yeah. They couldn't be further from each other in terms of their management style.
So, yeah, and Rassie has really leaned in, right? He said, I'm going to perform for you. I have got this. And it probably takes the heat off the players in a way, right? He's generating more of the headlines so his players can just focus on their work. Whereas Ireland, on the other hand, you barely would even know they were in South Africa. I have hardly heard a peep, and I'm sure it's deliberate. Yeah. We talked about, you know, obviously the media is separate to the team itself, but potentially they've learned that laying a little bit lower might work out a bit better for them, or at least prevents that kind of label of arrogance, etc., that got put on during the World Cup.
I think it's always their style. And to be fair, like, I think all of the discussion around the arrogance and all, it was mostly pundit led, right? Like it was mostly pundits taking shots at each other that caused that. Like, I don't recall any of the players ever saying anything. Obviously, Etzebeth came out afterwards and the whole Siva in the final thing, which I think was a bit of a mountain made out of a molehill, right? Like, I can imagine an Irish player who wants to acknowledge that that was a serious game for a pool stage game, looking at the opposition and saying, like, I think we might see you again. Like, I definitely get the logic of that, and I'm not sure that is arrogant. But all of the talk is out there now. Like, it is building to a fever pitch. There's Victor Matfield's taking shots. Like, loads of people are getting involved now. And it just feels like the game better be good at the weekend. Because if the game disappoints, a lot of people are going to be disappointed.
Imagine if it's garbage. Like, I'm so sure it won't be, but we wouldn't be. How would everyone cope after that? After all the build up, the story, the narrative, and it was just a crap game.
No way. I mean, please let that not happen. Okay.
So do we dare put a number to it?
I think we're going to have to.
I'm going to stick to my guns here. I'm saying South Africa between 5 and 12. The middle option.
Okay. I'm going to start in the head, because the head, I agree with you. Like, I think that's the most likely outcome. But I do also have like a sort of sneaking feeling that it might be really tight. I still think, this is terrible. This is terrible entertainment, because I'm just making noises and just kind of.
Well, think about the pool game. The pool game was 8-5, wasn't it? 13-8 something. That was really tight. So I don't think you're off base.
South Africa didn't have a kicker though. So, like, I do think the fact that Pollard, this is Pollard's first ever appearance against Ireland. He's never played against them for South Africa in his career. Yeah.
That is a wild stat. That is wild.
You know what? No, I'm gonna say South Africa by less than 5, because I do think they'll win the game, but I think Ireland might run them closer than we think.
Mm-hmm. Where's the second game being played?
Durban.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So second game, no altitude. I mean, that's one of the things that when you looked at this tour from the beginning, it was like, well, best case scenario is we win one game, right? Like, you've got to come out here, you got to get acclimatized. Although it's not like everyone in that South Africa team plays for the Bulls. It's not like they're all playing at altitude all the time. So like, they will struggle with it a little bit as well. But you have to think the bulk of the consequence of that is going to fall on Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. The URC really doing favors for everyone else. Out of the Bulls.
Yeah. And I'm so intrigued to see how Crowley and Casey go, because Munster sort of went a bit stale towards the end of the season, and they obviously had that defeat against Glasgow, which at the time felt like Munster had really dropped the ball, but then Glasgow went and won the thing. So it kind of puts that game into context. And, you know, it's a huge chance for Casey because he's been given a few chances to step up into an Ireland shirt. And I don't think it's necessarily his fault, but like the team performance when they've made a few changes tends not to be as good. So it's really hard for him to shine then. It's really hard for him to take that next step. So this is a great opportunity for him to be in with all of the first choice players and see what he can do. And you know, for the health of the national team, I hope he has a brilliant game, because to have two really reliable scrum half options in him and Gibson Park going into the next tournament will be amazing.
Oh, and you just think it takes one game sometimes, right, for a name to suddenly become a locked-in starter. Like Cam Roigard, he had two absolute whoppers at the World Cup, and everyone was like, that man is our starting 9. He's the second Aaron Smith. We'll be fine. You know, so it just takes one great game to show your entire skill set and what you're capable of for the coin to flip, or for the narrative to switch, or for you to suddenly be cemented and other people forgotten. So we shall see who emerges newly anointed stars from these series, I reckon.
Joe Schmidt always talks about how fine the margins are at this level. And, you know, with so few games a year, so few opportunities to make a name for yourself, like it really does come down to little 10, 15-minute spells often. And that like makes or breaks careers. And speaking of Joe Schmidt, we actually forgot to predict the Aussies against the Welsh.
Okay.
So let's circle back.
What
do you reckon?
Australia.
I'm happy to go first. Oh, Australia.
Between 5 and 12.
I'm going to go out on a limb with this one. I think Australia by more than 12.
Ooh.
I think Wales are going to struggle.
From a 40-6 defeat of the Wallabies in the World Cup to potentially losing
could you imagine?
More than 12.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking fine margins and how quickly your name can suddenly be at the top of the pecking order. Same thing for the whole fate of a team, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's been quick.
Just takes a few things to go wrong for you. But, you know, I don't hope that Wales lose by more than 12. I hope that both teams play well and there's a chance for both of them to kind of get some momentum from the tour. But Wales just look in such a difficult position at the moment. I think it's really hard to see things turning around for them quickly. Yeah,
momentum's a horrible thing in this sport sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's great when it's with you.
Yeah.
Horrible when it's against you. So, all right, well, that is the 3 games for the weekend. What's your setup when you're going to watch these? I
will be in the lounge for at least the All Blacks game. This is such a Kiwi thing. Every international rugby game, I must have my kiwi onion dip, which you probably have never heard of, but it's a very strange thing. It doesn't make sense as to how this was ever invented. Like the first person to do this, I don't know what they were doing, but you get onion soup mix, like powder one, and reduced cream, and you mix it together with like a little bit of vinegar, and you have that with your chips. That's
oh my God.
Me. I'll be having it's so good, but I think if you tried it, like we've grown up with it, so we're like, but I don't think you'd like it if you tried it. But so I'll be parked on the couch, at least for the All Blacks England game with some friends, chips and dip, and then I reckon I'll do my best with the Aussie Wales game out there, and then I'll probably have to do the Springboks from bed. But that's because what yours will be during the day.
Yes, so we can go from the All Blacks at 8 a.m. right the way through the day. So I'm actually at an event, so I think I'm gonna have to do 3 separate trips to the pub throughout the day. Just excuse myself. Yeah, I know, what a hard life. But I'll try and stay off the booze till Ireland, South Africa, because otherwise it's gonna be a very long day.
Need it.
But yeah.
It's going to be so different this time next week. We're going to have learned so much.
Well, that's it, right? Speculation's going to be over, and we're going to have like actual meaty detail to talk about. And I can't wait.
I can't wait either. Well, thank you everyone for listening, tuning in, commenting, supporting, sharing, everything. You can like, subscribe down below. We'll be probably catching up early next week to talk about everything that's happened over the weekend. So if you want some of Andy's expert analysis and my additional points, feel free to subscribe and come back for that.
Massively selling yourself short. What you also get is typical Kiwi humbleness. So there you go. But yeah, we will see you guys next week. Hope you all enjoy the games.
See you later.